Hey you, I'm Ali Amo, and this is the Lease on Life podcast. I'm going to ask you to suspend your beliefs for this episode because it might challenge you, and I just ask you to be open-minded and consider all perspectives before making a decision on what you prefer or understand or believe for yourself. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Polly Mae. Polly Mae is an ethical, non-monogamy coach specializing in open relationships and polyamory. How are you today, Polly Mae?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I've got to say, this is a topic that I haven't been exploring personally. I've just known a lot of people who go down different avenues in this arena. And my own curiosity, I started asking a lot of questions, and I'm still developing my understanding. So what can you do to introduce us to ethical non-monogamy, open relationships, and polyamory?
Okay. Wow. It's hard to even know where to start because ethical non-monogamy is an umbrella term for a huge variety of ways that are just outside of the typical monogamous structure of relating. So the most common one that we hear about is this idea of an open relationship, which again is actually a slightly unuseful word in the sense that it's again a huge umbrella term. An open relationship, no two are ever going to look the same. There are no two ways of doing ethical non-monogamy that will look the same. And an open relationship is different to polyamory, which is different to lots of different types of relationship structures, which I can go through if you would like. But I don't know if that interests you to hear all the different types of E&M.
I didn't even consider the multiple types, like the variations within the niche. I was first introduced to the idea of just non-monogamy in a relationship about 10 years ago by a friend of mine. And she introduced me to a partner and I loved him. And instinctively, and what I think most people do naturally, is they start imposing the traditional beliefs on it. And so I thought, oh, is this something that you think, long term and marriage? And she just went, Ali, you know me, monogamy is not our bag, like for both of us. And then my head was just like, and so instinctively again, I'm like, but don't you get jealous? And how does this work? Do you have multiple relationships? And the monogamy was just exploring sexual relationships with other people. And so it was like, do you tell each other? Do you keep it a secret? Because usually the non-ethical non-monogamy kind of in relationships is just people cheating. And because of that, I started doing a lot of research in the last week just to understand this, because as a movement, it might be not a loud one, but it is certainly present, certainly present. And I've just been meeting people nonstop in the last month. I think because it was something that I was wanting to talk about. It's just drawing all these people to me, and that it doesn't look the same for anyone that I've actually spoken to. So based on the fact that you are a coach in this arena, what are the types that you're referring to?
Well, I'm going to say now I'm going to miss something because there's so much and I don't have them all written in front of me. So I am so sincerely sorry to anybody who listens to this podcast and I miss yours very specific kind of E&M. I don't mean to. So I'll start with solo poly because that's what I'm practicing right now. I think,
Solo poly. Is that what you
yeah,
said? Okay.
yes. So solo poly is a person who lives a seemingly single life, but is also polyamorous. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Just roll with it, babe. Roll with
Or
it. Yeah.
I had a phone call from someone the other day, and I think I explained solo poly to 4 different people in 7 days just by
Okay.
talking about my life experience at the moment. And this guy said, as soon as I started solo poly, he said, "Oh, so you just fuck a bunch of people, don't you?" And I was like, "Wow, that is super offensive." I think that that's a common misconception of somebody who's solo poly. And I run a workshop, which I absolutely adore doing. I'm calling it E&M Fundamentals and Starting Places. But I actually explain some of the differences between solo poly and hookup culture because they actually come from fundamentally different places. Though I think that from talking to a lot of people about this too, that a lot of people who are single and getting to know lots of different people, they are actually solo poly and they don't realize. And I've had them say this to me. This isn't me imposing. This is them saying, oh, you know, Polly, I actually think that when I was single during this phase of my life, I was solo poly. You have the solo aspect is you're single. The poly aspect is about having many loves. So with polyamory, it translates to many loves. And that's the difference between polyamory and other forms of E&M. Solo poly is a lot like just normal polyamory, except you are your own primary partner and you relate to other people as well. So you might have multiple different relationships, which are real and authentic and enriching. And you can experience all sorts of emotional vulnerabilities with them. And those relationships can play out however you like. But at the end of the day, you are your own primary partner.
The way I'm interpreting it, it's kind of beautiful. It's like your relationship with yourself is primary to you, and then everything else is secondary.
100%. Yeah, that's right.
There is so much we can learn about ourselves through this because a lot of people don't put themselves first and their relationship with themselves first in any kind of relationship, even single people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Some people have to be single in order to do that, but to do that in the context of multiple relationships happening simultaneously, you really do need to be grounded within yourself, right?
It helps stop you from getting lost in relationships and stops you from falling victim to that feeling of enmeshment when you have in the back of your head at all times, I am my own primary partner. What does she want first? What honors her first? How can I show her she is valued and loved and worthy? What does that look like for me in this situation? How can I advocate for her?
That's so beautiful.
So, as a single polyamorous person, I do engage with multiple other people, both romantically and sexually, and those relationships are far from meaningless. Those relationships are deeply enriching and fulfilling and vulnerable. It's a beautiful expression of love. And there's a great concept called the relationship escalator. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but the
No,
relationship escalator is what traditional monogamy looks like. And I'm not against monogamy in any way, shape, or form. My whole thing is just about giving people more option. And I joke in my workshop that if we lived in an opposite world, I'd be preaching about the beauty of monogamy rather than the beauty of polyamory. Because to me, it's just about giving more options. So I just want to make that clear too. But the relationship escalator is this idea that when we go on our first date or we meet someone for the first time, we get on an escalator and it just keeps going and going and going and going. So it starts with flirting and then a date and then multiple dates and then moving in and then getting married and then having kids and then growing old and dying together or something, right? And polyamory really acknowledges and hinges upon this idea that not all relationships escalate forever, nor should they. But most people don't have multiple primary partners, for example. Some might, but for the most part, we'll have maybe one partner and maybe a couple more at most that we sort of go on this escalator with, that we have this concept of life partnership with. But a lot of other relationships sort of stop at that. I prefer the term lovers. And I know some people kind of cringe or withdraw sometimes when I say that for the first time, because in a pop culture, we don't really use the word lovers anymore. I think it's such a shame because it's a beautiful word and it really brings that enriching fulfillment back to what other people would see as just a hookup.
so, what classification would this be? I've recently met someone, and it's the first openly polyamorous person that I've ever met. He has, there was two relationships that he was in at the time. One was with a homosexual man, and the other was with a transitioned female. I think I've said that right. It was a male who transitioned to a female. So there was like a heterosexual relationship and a homosexual relationship. And the two partners knew each other and sometimes they'd hang out together, but obviously they weren't in a relationship. And that whole scenario just challenged me on about 19 different levels. But even he was so open to discussing it and explaining it, and I had a separate conversation with his male partner. I haven't gotten to the female partner because there's a whole extra bag there of things to explore, but just trying to get my head around that. So, would he be considered a solo poly or no?
There's a few different ways that you might be able to define what kind of relating he is. Solo poly could be one way that he may identify his expression of polyamory. Another way you might look at that, a triad where he is the hinge partner. So it is, especially if the two, those are called, gonna throw a whole bunch of jargon at you. His partners would be considered metamors to each other. So
Metamors. Okay.
mm,
Yep.
your partner's partner is a metamor. Mm. So
Okay.
he in this, like, if I should have brought a whiteboard into this.
I got
That's
a triangle in my head. He's at the top of the triangle and they're both connected to him. Because of him, they're connected to each other. So they are metamors to each other.
yeah,
Is
and he
that
would
right?
and he would be considered the hinged partner. Yeah. But it depends on, you'd have to ask him. That's the thing is in my workshop, I explain like every kind of E&M that I am aware of, but I always start with this disclaimer of this is a highly personal thing, how you choose to define your relating style. And it's definitely not a fixed science. So what being polyamorous means to one person is different from another. And, for example, let's talk about swinging for a second just to mix it up because I want to include as many E&M people as I can. You could have a swinging person who swinging is typically the generic idea is you have a couple, you have another couple, they swap partners for sexual activities. I'll leave it at that.
That's base level though, right? It has definitely evolved from that. I shared a sauna with a chick last week and this conversation come up because this is her sort of jam. And she actually works in a swingers club. She's like the reception, but it's also something that she explores herself. And she's also in like an E&M, ethical non-monogamous relationship. And her partner was overseas at the time. Interestingly, she actually explained to me that the root of this aspect of her was born from childhood trauma with sexual abuse. So yeah, yeah. So it was kind of like owning that part of you that yeah, was traumatized and exploring as a result. So this conversation is right up my alley, literally, because it was a conversation I had about a week ago. So I can get my head around these things now. So hit me beyond base level of swinging.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the general concept of swinging is that, couple meets couple and they swap partners for sexual activities. There's a lot of different ways that that can play out, but I bring it up to explain how personal it can be, what title you choose for yourself. Because you might have two couples and maybe they swap partners all the time. And maybe they do other things too, because it's very common with swingers that they develop beautiful friendship from this practice. But then there's kind of this debate that's like, well, if the four of you are going out and doing activities together, having dinner together, having sexual encounters together, at what point does that tip into polyamory? Right? How you
Mm,
could also call that a quad potentially. It's out from the outside looking in, you could look at the same set of things and use different labels. But labels exist in part to help us feel safe and secure. And I can definitely understand why somebody who's swinging or calls themselves swinger decides to keep that title rather than going and calling themselves polyamorous. I mean, I started as a swinger and it took me a long time before I felt comfortable saying that I'm polyamorous. And quite frankly, it wasn't until somebody else that I know referred to themselves as polyamorous that I thought,
that's
you know,
me.
that's, yeah. And I knew that that was me, but I was just scared to use the title because of all the prejudice, the way the media represents polyamorous people, and that's part of what I'm trying to do is help normalize and go, polyamory is just a person who loves multiple people, and we all love multiple people all the time. I'm just now including romantic love. We have lots of friends that we love. We parents have lots of kids that they love. We have elaborate networks of family as well. So not that crazy actually when you think about it, but it's a shame and highly convenient in some ways that we've shamed romantic love.
Well, what I'm curious about myself, because a few people that I've spoken to in this realm, it's not two people who are both polyamorous or keen for open relationships that find each other. What my experience was it tends to be someone who is not only open to open relationships, but it's a necessity for them to have an open relationship. They meet someone who wants exclusivity and that typical escalator ride. And then the partners had to explore these things, come to understand these things in order to
Mm.
have that relationship that they desire. So is that common for you as a coach? Are you working with who? Who are you working with in this
Yeah.
space? Are you working with the partners who are learning to adjust, or the people who want to find another person who is like it has the same interests and desires as them to explore a relationship together? Like, how does this work
Both,
for you?
both. And I think as well, when I started out, I really wanted this to be for couples to open their relationship. And it still is. Like the program that I've got is geared specifically for that, all of the challenges that come with opening a monogamous relationship for the first time. However, in the workshop that I run, I get overwhelmed actually with singles who want to come to the workshop. And the workshop also was created for couples. So I allowed it. And I think what I'm finding is there are so many people these days who are, what's the word, willfully single. You know, that's their choice. They want to be single, or they also either being single is what they desire, or they're just not finding what satisfies them in traditional relating, even if those aren't the words they use. They haven't settled down, so to speak, because it's just not clicking for them. And I think some of those people, it's because traditional relating and monogamy it just isn't working for a lot of people. So that I think that there are a lot of singles sitting around right now with their ears open to E&M and polyamory, thinking this kind of sounds more like me. You know, a lot of, especially I think women, that is a huge part. Like women are just now living in a time where we have autonomy and choice over our lives in a way bigger way than we've ever had before. And it's so motivating and empowering. And I want to get that message out more too. Like I'm a woman doing this. And this makes me feel like I have freedom and choice and liberty over my life. I don't feel like there's ever going to be a time where I have to sacrifice my own right for security. That used to be the way, but it's not anymore.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not anymore. And now we are equal co-creators in our relationship. And that is a beautiful thing. And what's so sad to me is that the script at the moment, the narrative is that the man is forcing this onto the women. And that's not the case. You know, I'm sure it happens. I'm sure, I mean, there's always bad eggs and everything. But really, there are a lot of women who are walking this way because they're like, why would I sacrifice my freedom?
I actually had a conversation with a woman the other day, and I just I just had the urge, for some reason, it was like intuitively I picked it up, and she didn't know what I was talking about when I said ethical non-monogamy. She didn't know what I was talking about when I said polyamory and I said open relationship. She said, "Oh, I've done that in the past, definitely." And I
Hmm.
said, "Was it your choice?" And she went, "Oh, yeah, it was my choice." And I went, "Okay." And then I could sort of feel it, and I said, um, is this your choice based on the individual? Like, if you do not see, and the escalator is a perfect metaphor for this, if you don't see an escalator with this person, you strategically singleize yourself and keep your option open, sort of thing. So you'll keep an open relationship when you don't see a future, but it's like Mr. Right Now, if that makes sense. So you can explore other avenues, but otherwise you'll close the circle and keep it monogamous when you feel like. And she went, absolutely, that's what I do. But I've never heard of it put in open relationship or ethical non-monogamy or polyamory sort of thing. It was just something that she did based on herself. And the beauty is, like you said, we're able to be a lot more free and have choice and autonomy when it comes to career now. And then you look at the statistics of women who are deciding either not to have children at all or
Mm.
to push it as far back as possible so that they can have their lives. And then the natural inclination would be to explore these avenues in relationships as well, considering the family structure and planning has sort of changed. So I can understand why that's the case, but what are the main challenges that you find for people in these arenas? Because I think to myself, having the conversation with a partner or a friend is one thing, but family, how does your family come to an understanding and an acceptance of your situation? The challenges, I assume, would be family because you've got generations of traditional belief systems and ones that sort of struggle to understand why you might choose certain career paths that might be not materially and security based, kind of thing. And then you've got pushing children back. I've been pressured to have kids since I was 12 years old. You know what I mean? That's just the way it always was in Italian culture. So I just think when it comes to relationships, introducing partners to family or how do you have this conversation with family? What does that look like? How do you introduce people? And this to me is like a whole gamut I'm just fascinated by, really.
It's so interesting to me what concerns people the most when they hear about it. I think it's different for everybody. Like, because for you, clearly it's family. If you're going to do this, family. So to answer your question, it's not super satisfactory, but it depends. It really depends how you approach this conversation, because the first thing you need to think about is threat. So, how connected is your family to your work life? And should people at work find out, is your job in harm's way? That's the first thing to consider. The next thing to consider is, do you have children? And if so, where, yeah, how is your family dynamic? Is there a possibility? Is your family one where if they heavily disagree with you, if they're very conservative, are they going to sue for custody of your child or make a problem there? So thinking about threats first of going, okay, what am I safe to actually be open with my family? Right.
Mm.
I think though, and I could be wrong here, this is just my observation and speaking from personal experience and, who I've spoken to as well. I think that a lot of people who explore ethical non-monogamy are already coming from, you have to be pretty open-minded and you have to have broken down other conventions in life, or you probably will break down other conventions. Like it might be the first convention you break down and then more will follow or vice versa. But usually when you're this kind of person, you don't stop at relating. So all of that to say is you might be the kind of person that maybe doesn't even have a relationship with their family. Yeah, it just
Mm.
depends. But I also don't want to promote that as a stereotype. There are lots of polyamorous people with great relationships with their family too. Well, it is just as
Interesting
good.
that you say that because the person who introduced me to the idea of a non-monogamous relationship 10 years ago, she was a dead set freaking cycle breaker. Muslim parents as far back as the eye can see with generations. And she was just a cycle breaker in all fronts, not just in not challenging the religion, but not standing by it, looking at all like more omonism. So that was part of it. Having mental illness and coming out with that was another cycle being broken because it was something that was never being talked about. Exploring sexuality and all sides of the coin was something very challenging to her family. And as a result of her breaking cycle after cycle after cycle of not just beliefs, but history, the time strand of the web of life that I created with her family, it was so challenging that they sort of had this disconnected relationship because they can't get on board with her as a person because she challenges everything. So as a result of that, it kind of gave her a liberated space to be able to naturally explore what she wanted to in her own personal relationships. And it's not something that she discussed openly or promoted, but she's always open to discussion because she knows that's the door to growth, to evolution, and to true connection and people's understandings and perspectives shifting. So that makes total sense to me what you said. So the people that I know or have met, it's not really something that is behind closed doors, but it's not something that's at everybody else's doorstep, if that makes sense, because it is something very much you need to explore on your own from what you're saying to even understand where you fit in the spectrum of this sort of thing.
Totally. And people are completely different levels of open. I'm only internet. But in my personal circles, I talk to everybody about this very organically. And everyone's very curious and they want to know what E&M is, open relationships, polyamory. They're curious. And it always breeds these really fun conversations with everyone in my circle where they end up confiding in me what their ideal situation would be. And it's very, very, very rarely traditional monogamy. It happens, but for the most part, people have some kind of, even if it's just one boundary that they would have different that is not part of the traditional, there's something, some way they would tweak it, but they don't for all sorts of reasons. I guess what I'm trying to say is the desire for this is heavily prevalent. And people who are practicing it, some of them are doing it completely behind closed doors. You would never, ever, ever know that, your friend you're going to yoga with every other Tuesday is a swinger or something. So there's a lot that's happening behind closed doors for sure. And I wish more people could see. I wish we could be lit up with a certain color or something so that you would know how many people are walking around every day. And like how you said, how you keep bumping into all these people now. Well, I'll tell you what, people say this to me all the time after they talk to me. I've got a friend and I was telling her all about my business, what I was creating. And her husband were like, "Oh, Polly, are you sure there are enough people to have a business on this?" And I laughed and I said, "I'm quite sure there are a lot." And then about a week later, that friend came to me. She's like, "Can you believe ever since we had this conversation, my hairstylist and da 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 da, like all these people." I'm like, yeah, yeah. Like, no, once you become aware, you're suddenly seeing it all around you because it is all around you.
Well, it's like all of a sudden because you're open to something, because this is not a surface level conversation to have with someone. You know what
Mm,
I mean? It's something that if you bring it up, you'd be surprised how many people will start coming up and out with things. And it might be something in the past, somebody that they know, someone that they're related to, or something they're exploring for themselves. But when you look at the statistics on just cheating alone in Australia, that's come out fairly recently, and it was frightening. So this is the non-ethical non-monogamy sort of thing, but they're in the monogamous relationship, so it seems. You know what I mean? So there's obviously a desire for this. The thing that sort of clashes with my mentality is
mm,
this idea of traditional relationships and the monogamous side of things. When you get down to it, the reason why it is the more common, the more predominant, the expectation sort of thing, if you as an individual listener actually reflected on why it is that you believe relationships should go a certain way and look a certain way and result in a certain thing, it's all based on history and religion for a large part of it as well. And even in Islam as a religion, there is ethical non-monogamy,
mm,
multiple wives. And that's something that I was faced with in my travels to Egypt and meeting people with multiple wives and understanding how that dynamic looks,
mm,
which is a version of it. It's obviously exploited sometimes. It's not always done ethically and religiously
mm,
how you're supposed to do it. But these things are sort of forced upon you with social expectations, these ideas and their entrenched beliefs that are reflected in us as individuals. So if this is not something that you can understand or be open to, the idea is to reflect on where this comes from. And it's only through people like yourself
mm,
and all the people that I've been meeting and the people everyone else has been meeting that are coming up and out with this information that makes you think about it and see it not only as a possibility, but also it's not a horrible, ugly, nasty, cold,
no,
detached thing at all. And it's funny that you're talking about this, right? There was this, I think she's an influencer. I don't know. She's in the business world and she come out this year because she was tired of preaching authenticity and not really being authentic and expressing herself. And she's married and there's lots of posts with her husband, but she come out and said that her relationship is E&M, basically. It's an open relationship. And the way she's not pitched it, but the way she's expressed it was we both have enough love to give that it doesn't affect the love we share with each other. to explore other connections with people. Go, you want to say something? I can hear you. I can
Oh,
feel
I
you.
want to chip in on that because what you're speaking right to the heart of polyamory, and it's this like we have this conditioned belief that love is a limited resource, and it's not. Love is not a limited resource, and we know this. We know this because of how we love everything else in our lives. What is a limited resource is time and energy. And you do have to think about those things. But you know what? You have to think about those things again for everything in life, your hobbies, your career, your family, whatever it is. So it's just adding another thing onto the pile of, how you distribute your time and energy. But love is not limited. And I think that that's a huge hiccup people get on because there's this common thing I hear when I start to talk about E&M. People go, "Oh yeah, there should be no problem with it." I'm like, "Okay, great. I'm about to agree with this person." They say, like, "There's no problem with it because sex and love are totally different." I'm like, "Great, yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. You can totally have sexual exploration, and I'm an advocate for that. There's a place for that. I see that, and I agree with it. But it makes me a little sad when people start to pick apart love and sex so much that it becomes my partner can have sex with someone else, but if they start to have any feelings for them, that's a big problem. And I empathize with where they're coming from because they're coming from a place of fear and scarcity because that is what we have been taught. We've been taught that if our significant other falls in love with a second person, it means that they're not in love with us, that it was never real, or now that they love the second person, they could never still love us. And I can tell you with total certainty that that is not true. Your partner or you or whoever, all of us, can love multiple people at a time. It is not a scarce resource.
What I found interesting about this individual that I was talking about that sparked this conversation,
Mhm.
I was quite in awe of her because I thought, whoa, that takes courage to just come out and say it. And what made it even more interesting in the comments, this was on an Instagram post that I saw.
Mhm.
Her husband actually said, I'm here. I can answer any and all of your questions. And it was just basically starting a conversation. And the way the world reacted, she lost a lot of followers. A lot of people were commenting very negatively. And you could see the root of why this was something that they couldn't understand or refused to understand or then judge them for. Or it was very interesting to watch as an outsider because this is something that's been ongoing in her relationship probably since before they even got married. Like, this isn't a new thing. It's just new that this is being shared. And when the veil comes down and you have the opportunity to ask, instead of attack and judge and whatever, why wouldn't you just open up the conversation, especially to have the husband there who they were talking about and judging like it's affecting him negatively. He was
Mhm.
open to talking about it. So
Yeah.
it's sort of getting to that point where this is something that can be discussed, but it seems like it's in the blanket box of what sexuality being outside of hetero and even homosexuality in the past. It's like that box has now been replaced with this sort of stuff.
I agree.
Mm.
And have the conversation. Like, if you know somebody and they're in one of these types of relationships and you know about it, they almost certainly want to talk to you about it. They
Oh,
almost certainly,
absolutely.
we're
Not
all
almost 100% they're open to chat. Yeah.
we're all dying to have the conversation because, if you have decided to go off the traditional relating path, or this, you could make this much broader to any human being who's gone off any traditional path, there is a reason that they have decided to go a new direction. That was a journey, that was a transformation. When people come into my workshop, I say that to them, there was a journey for you to get in this room, to be open enough to learning about E&M. There was a journey. So ask the question. And I even found out that somebody was saying some negative things about E&M who I was connected to after one of my workshops. His comment was, I think I'm just trying to get the quote right. Oh, something like every person I've known from an open relationship or everybody from an open relationship comes from a broken family. And when I heard this, the person who was telling me about this, that they'd heard the person say it, was really upset on my behalf, you know? They were saying, "How could he say this? Blah, 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 blah." I thought, why didn't he say it to me? Because I would have loved to have had that conversation. I would have loved it. Honestly, I'm not scared of somebody's opinion being different to mine. I'm not scared of your life view being different to mine. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think we all have a place on this planet. I think we all have unique journeys. And I understand that what somebody is saying about how I relate is speaking to them, not to me. And had I had the opportunity to have that conversation around they all just come from broken homes, I would have said, okay, for argument's sake, let's say they do. Just for argument's sake. That's not the truth, but let's play that out. Why do you think somebody from a home where there is an unhappy marriage then chooses to go onto an E&M journey? What do you think that they saw in that relationship that wasn't ideal? And how do you think E&M might actually be a better option for them? Maybe they saw infidelity in their family home and thought that maybe there was another way if their parents had just communicated better. And I could go on that tangent, but, have the conversation with somebody. And if you're able, even if you have a question, if you're able to phrase it sensitively, even better, but have the conversation.
It's so funny that you mentioned that. I have to show you something for you to understand where I'm coming from, right? Give me one sec.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
told you that this podcast is based on my intellectual property that I wrote the book about. All right, let me
Mhm.
see if I can get you to see this. Can you
I can
read
see
that?
yeah, energy, history, experiences, environment, science, belief. Is that childhood and then relationship?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
All
you.
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's
Keep bring pictures.
thank you. That's the web of life that I created, right?
Yeah.
So the way it works, we get bugs stuck in our web and we then spiral around the bug instead of around the whole web with ease and flow like a spider, right? And the spiraling are our cycles. Yeah. So, what I sought to do for my own mental model to understand all of this was while I'm speaking to people about all things E&M, polyamory, open relationships, everything, even just cheating, all of the above, it's like understanding if there was a specific bug these people have in their web that makes them spiral and break a cycle and create another one in its place. So I can understand that individual that you're talking about, that guy, he may have found that correlating factor is well, when you say broken home, you mean you grew up and parents split, and that's the idea of the traditional
That's
broken home.
because I didn't get to have the conversation. But I'm assuming that that's what that person meant. Yeah.
How many people can you think of off the top of your head who may not have had the broken home, but had the parents who stayed together whilst miserable because of society, because of beliefs, because of family, because of religion, and the effects that that had on the children? That could be a reason why people don't believe in that whole concept because they haven't seen a
Mm.
beautiful representation of it or it in its most idealistic form. And then by the same token, people I know who had the parents who loved each other unconditionally and endlessly and had such a close, loving connection doesn't necessarily equate to the children finding that for themselves and things like that as well. So I don't think there really would be any specific bugs that everybody in this arena has in common. But I
Mhm.
think it's very much what you said. It's something that made them want to go a different direction,
Mm. Mhm.
whatever that looked like. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
100%.
Mm.
So many reasons to go on this journey. There's so many things that make it healing. There's so much. So I don't think that for many people, it really actually has anything to do with the home that they were raised in. I think that's pretty uncommon. And in fact, I was just listening today about a research project that's been going on for many years, like 20 years or maybe longer, following polyamorous families and their kids and like how that's played out over time. And they're discussing about whether or not the kids raised in polyamorous homes also wanted to be polyamorous, but it hasn't really had that effect. Like there maybe were one or two people who thought, yeah, I'll be polyamorous, but most of them just went, see what happens.
When you say polyamorous, like in the family structure, paint a picture about what that looks like for the parents and the families. I know it can look like many things, but even just for the purpose of this study.
I believe even for the purposes of this study, they had a diverse range. So
Okay.
that wouldn't have meant that there are polycules all living in a house raising children.
There
That
are
may
what
have
now? Polycules.
polycules. So I'm sorry, that's another piece of jargon. It's a network of polyamorous people. Okay. And sometimes that can be a closed unit as well, but not always. So it
Yep.
could like a group of 4 or 5 people who are all relating to each other, but they might have different dynamics of how each relationship plays out. That's a polycule. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And
My
then
new
the
word for the day. Thank you.
I think you've got a few. I think you can make flashcards from this podcast.
Good call. Good call. I'll pay that.
So I think that from what I presume, based off of what I was listening to, there was a variety of different types of polyamorous families where I think that there might have been a few throuples, but a lot of polyamory does happen of that sort of primary partner where you've got a dyad, so two people relating to each other. And there's a lot of different language, but to make this simple, that's what I'm going to say.
Hmm.
And then each of those people go out and have their own adventures, relationship, and, they can just happen in a parallel kind of way like that. So that doesn't really answer your question other than just give you a lot more information on polyamory.
No, but you know what? What's the difference between what you were looking at with this and some of the fears and things people have about gay couples or lesbian couples adopting a child, raising a child, and there's even a belief that you're going to teach them to be gay, teach them to be a lesbian and things like that. It doesn't work like that. But this is basically an extension of that from what you're saying. Like, mm,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mm,
But they were saying in the study that actually what they found with the kids was that they were able to hold their own better when they went on to college, that their ability to navigate the world seemed to be higher. So, anyways, I don't want to try to regurgitate this person's research for a variety of reasons. I don't want to get it wrong, and I also don't want to take her word. It was very interesting to listen to, how this flows on and how it doesn't. And I really don't think it makes a massive difference what family you come from. I think that being polyamorous for many, 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 many people is about identity. And for some people, it's for lifestyle. But I think for a lot of us, it's about a greater fulfillment of who we are as a person.
I completely understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
Completely. And although this is something that I discussed with my partner the other day, and I just said to him, I don't know. I can't. I like. Are we unevolved? Because this is not something that like I just can't see this for myself. I like. I can understand it for other people, but the relationship that we have, I couldn't share you, and I wouldn't want you to want to share me. And he said, I can understand that too. And then I'm thinking, the whole self of me that I can be with you, could I, should I ever give that to somebody else? Or it was just for me, I knew that it's not something that fits me and it can't, but I can understand and respect that in other people. But I can also understand that there are people like us because obviously the people we know, this is something that's part of the conversation. It's part of our connections with others because I've had to meet multiple partners and explore and understand things for myself. But there are people who cannot understand this.
Mhm.
Maybe they don't want to. I don't know. But what do you think? What would be the sort of primary message that you think could help people just open their minds to an open relationship? It doesn't have to be them, but to help understand and make sense of people who do prefer this. That's a big question. I'm so sorry.
I'm trying to think of which angle to tackle that from.
Come at it from multiple. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the first thing that popped into my head, because you said help somebody understand open relationships. I'm going to first do it from the standpoint of understand it for themselves or
Mm,
understand it from the sense that their partner has just brought it to them and they're like, spiraling, you know, you know, The first thing I would say there is boundaries. Everything comes down to boundaries. And like that in and of itself can be a little bit of a journey because you know what boundaries come down to? Self-worth, self-esteem, your own strength as a person. So knowing what your boundaries are is really a journey of knowing who you are. That's where it starts. But to understand an open relationship, like I said in the beginning, an open relationship or ethical non-monogamy, there are no two that look the same because all it really is renegotiating or negotiating for the first time ever what boundaries are in your relationship. Because the
Mm.
honest truth is, if you ask most like typical monogamous people what is cheating, and you ask both people in that relationship, they might have totally different answers.
Oh, yeah.
Is it
Mm.
flirting? Is it porn? Is it kissing? Is it, where, or is it just sex? Like, what is cheating? Having that conversation. So it's kind of having that conversation expanded, you know?
Mm.
And you might actually find that there's something called polyintimate as a form of polyamory, which I talk
Okay.
about workshop because I think that it's so common and prevalent that even the most monogamous people could slot into this type of polyamory.
I got
And
nothing. I'm like exploring my brain. Like, what could that mean? I don't get it. Help.
the thing, a polyintimate is a relationship where the couple is sexually exclusive with each other. Okay. So that hasn't changed. They're
Okay.
still monogamous when it comes to sexuality. But emotionally, they are more open. So what that would look like is that stuff like if you go and get coffee with your male friend from high school and the two of you talk about how he's been having troubles at work or his parent has died, and you sit there and hold space for him and sit in compassion and give him love and care, that is actually within the dynamic of your monogamous relationship. But when you look at more traditional monogamy, that, would not have been okay. Or there might be certain monogamous relationships now where that's not okay. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. I
But that
have so many male friends that I do that sort of stuff with, and the joke with my partner is, "Oh, you're gonna see other boyfriend," or whatever, you know what I mean? But I thought, you
perfect.
it's not only sharing, it's a different form of intimacy to be able to share and to be supported and guided and nurtured with compassion and love and all of that sort of stuff, but if you take it out of the partners and look at it as friendships, you can have your best friend and you can have your oldest friend in the world and you can have a work friend and school friends and people that you meet. And it's not like you love any friend less to love another friend and be there for another friend. Hmm. Mm. Mm. What else come up when I ask the question?
So the boundary thing
Mm.
is I helpful when your partner has approached you with it is
Mm.
understanding negotiate all boundaries all the way through, or you should be. And that's what I advocate for. And that's
Yep.
what anybody who's been doing it a while will advocate for. But if you're just trying to understand, I mean, still maybe that partner, but more like your friends and things, I would say I would encourage you to think about some of the values that underpin it, which like I was saying before about autonomy, choice, freedom, liberation, exploration, and adventure. All of those sorts of values, I think just can help you understand. Like, if you can understand that I get to choose my own adventure in a much more detailed way, and that's a value for me, and that's really important to how I want to live my life. And I think that my friends get that. They understand me pretty well. They've always understood that I am an adventure seeking kind of person and that freedom and liberation are really important to me. And this is just a further expansion of those values.
And I think something needs to be said by this blanket belief that seems to be the foundation of the challenge for people, that it is sex orientated or sex focused, or
Yeah.
it can be for some people. Is that right? Like it's,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, when I started, it would have been purely a sexual exploration, because I started as a swinger with a past partner of mine. And that had so much beauty and enrichment to it in and of itself. For me, it was like I actually really related to a friend or something you mentioned of how, she'd had, sexual trauma past. And I have too. And so for me, my past partner was he was the first person I ever had, consensual sexual activities with. And
Mm,
we got into exploring swinging, it became like this really beautiful, nurturing place for me to, because we always did what was called same room sort of swap, I guess.
mm,
Um, so he was always there, is my point. And you know how it is. We was a long term relationship. He was my person. So, it was like if he was in the room, I was safe, which meant I actually had this safety to explore in a way that, I couldn't have gotten any other way in my life. And that was so beautiful. And I'm also bi or pansexual. So I came to that realization in that long term relationship. So through swinging, I could explore, what it was like to be with women and all that kind of thing. So there's definitely a lot of beauty that can come from the strictly sexual side. And if that's where you're comfortable exploring, then by all means, go that direction. But there are a lot of people who get into it for at this point in my journey, I'm very love focused. I'm very connection focused. I don't want to relate to people who I don't feel that kind of strong tie to. It's just not where I'm at right now. And that's another important point of all E&M is the same person will venture through different types of E&M during their life, depending on what life phase they're at, where they're at relationally with their primary partner, if they have one, and other context as well. Like, are you building a family? Are you changing jobs? Are you moving? Are you traveling for work? Like all these, there's so much that goes into how you choose to relate at this given moment, and it's not static.
absolutely. Well, there is certainly a need for coaches like you because even within any kind of E&M, open relationship, polyamorous, all of the things, you have to navigate these boundaries and sometimes they get challenged or your partner reacts differently than how they thought they would to certain things. And it's always this constant growth and evolution and discussion. It's never just going to be confined and you just bounce in like one of those ping pong table things. You know what I mean? Oh, sorry, pinball tables. It's always going to bounce outside the square in some way, shape, or form for at least one person in
Mhm.
the situationship you got going on. So
Mhm.
it's something that constantly needs to be navigated. And so if you can have someone like you to support somebody through that, especially for the partners, the ones that I've spoken to who were on the flip side, and this was they've, been brought up to them and it's something that they've then explored. A lot of them are listening to podcasts or reading books and stuff like that. To actually have a live one, different story altogether, and to help with the parameters and the boundaries, because it's often they come with boundaries like not imposed on them, but suggested like this is what I want, and it's on you to get on board with that. And I know a lot of particularly women who've gotten on board with things that they probably wouldn't have just to stay in that relationship, whereas they're not really being true and authentic to themselves about their own boundaries, you know? Mm.
And like at the core of polyamory to me is about self-worth. And that's what I want everyone to take home with them from anything I do. I want them to know self-worth. I want them to know boundaries and I want them to know clear communication. And, no matter how you relate, I hope that that can be something that people take from me because I am not invested in anybody being monogamous or non-monogamous. At the end of the day, I don't really care. I do care though that you feel like you're worthy of expressing your boundaries, whatever they are, that you're worthy of figuring out what your boundaries are, and you're worthy of a relationship that meets your desires and your needs, no matter what those things are. And sometimes maybe that means you go a different path. Maybe you find somebody else who's more compatible, but you're worthy of that too.
I have to say, I commend you for supporting and assisting people to be cycle breakers in this relationship arena. It's something that is necessary as part of human evolution and collective consciousness expansion, all of the above. So, thank you so much for having the courage really to come out and do this, because doing it yourself is one thing, but guiding and supporting other people through it, it's such a needed tool, resource in society. So thanks for being here with us for this ep. New ones will come out to you every other Thursday. I will have all of the links and all of the socials for Polly Mae and for her business in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to comment. Try to be respectful, please. I know this might be a little bit challenging, but thank you to Polly Mae for having this conversation with us today. It means the world. And you take it easy, people. You'll hear from me soon.